June 14, 1963, 9:32 p.m. A private apartment in Paris. Brigitte Bardot sat at a dinner table with 8 people, actors, directors, close friends from the industry. The kind of intimate gathering where guards came down, where people felt safe. Jean-Paul Belmondo was holding court at the other end of the table, telling stories. He was magnetic, funny, the kind of person who could make anyone laugh. He'd just wrapped that man from Rio and was riding high, cocky, confident, beloved by everyone. Everyone except Brigitte, who was about to learn why charm can be the most dangerous weapon. Someone asked Belmondo about working with difficult actresses. "Oh, I've got stories," he said, grinning. "But the best one is about Brigitte here." Brigitte looked up, smiled cautiously, assumed he'd tell some innocuous anecdote from a film set. "So we're doing a scene for A Woman is a Woman. You all saw it, right? Gorgeous film. And there's this moment where Brigitte's character is supposed to be spontaneous, natural, real. He was building to something. The table was listening, smiling, waiting for the punchline. And Vadim pulls me aside and says, 'Just so you know, none of this is natural for her. She's so calculated that she rehearses how to look unrehearsed. Even her breakdowns are performed.'" Nervous laughter around the table. A few people glanced at Brigitte, and I didn't believe him at first. I thought, no way. Brigitte's the most natural actress I know. But then I started watching, and he was right. Even when she cries, and she cries a lot, you can see her checking, making sure it looks good, making sure someone's watching. The laughter grew louder. People were uncomfortable, but laughing anyway. Because Belmondo was so charming, because refusing to laugh would make things awkward. Brigitte's face had gone white. Belmondo continued, emboldened by the response. "The best part? Vadim told me she practices in the mirror, actually practices different types of crying. Sad crying, angry crying, heartbroken crying. Like it's a skill she's perfecting. It's not authentic emotion, it's performance. Always performance. Even in private, she's Brigitte Bardot. There's no one underneath." The table went silent. A few people looked at their plates. Someone coughed. Brigitte stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking. "Excuse me," she said quietly, and walked to the bathroom. As soon as the bathroom door closed behind her, she started crying. Real crying. The kind Belmondo had just mocked. The kind he'd reduced to performance, to calculation, to something pathological. But he wasn't entirely wrong. That was the worst part. She did rehearse emotions. She did practice crying in the mirror. Because after years of directors demanding more emotion and make it real and I need authentic tears, she'd learned to manufacture what they wanted. She'd turned genuine emotion into a skill. Because genuine emotion on demand is impossible. So she'd learned to fake it, so convincingly that even she sometimes couldn't tell the difference. And Vadim, her ex-husband, had noticed, had judged her for it, and had shared that observation with Belmondo like it was entertaining trivia about his ex-wife's pathology. And now Belmondo had turned it into a dinner party joke. In front of their colleagues, their friends, she heard voices through the bathroom door. "Someone, maybe Catherine Deneuve," said Jean-Paul. "That was cruel." "What? It was just a joke. She knows I'm kidding. She's crying in the bathroom. She doesn't think you're kidding." "Oh, come on. Brigitte's tough. She can take a joke." "That wasn't a joke. That was humiliation. You're being dramatic. It was a funny story about how professional she is. If anything, it's a compliment." Brigitte stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, at her tear-streaked face, at the crying she couldn't stop. Was this real? Or was this performed? Was she genuinely hurt? Or was she manufacturing hurt? Because that's what the situation called for. She didn't know anymore. And that uncertainty, planted by Vadim's observation and weaponized by Belmondo's joke, was more painful than the humiliation. There was a soft knock on the door. "Brigitte? It's Catherine. Can I come in?" Brigitte unlocked the door. Catherine Deneuve slipped inside, closing it behind her. "Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. And I don't know if this crying is real or if I'm performing hurt. because that's what I'm supposed to do when someone humiliates me. It's real. Trust me, what he said was vicious. But it was also true. I do rehearse emotions. I do practice in mirrors. I've turned feelings into technique because that's the only way to survive in this industry. That doesn't make you pathological. That makes you professional. And Belmondo turning your survival mechanism into a punchline makes him cruel. They stayed in the bathroom for 10 minutes. When they emerged, the dinner had fractured. Half the guests had left. Belmondo was still at the table, looking annoyed. There she is. See? She's fine. I told you she could take a joke. Brigitte walked over to him, spoke quietly. That wasn't a joke. That was you exposing something vulnerable about me for laughs. Using information from my ex-husband to humiliate me in front of colleagues. Oh, come on. And you knew it would hurt me. That's why you told it. Because hurting me made you feel powerful, made everyone laugh, made you the center of attention. You're being oversensitive. No, you're being cruel. And calling cruelty a joke doesn't make it less cruel. It just makes you a coward. She left. Didn't say goodbye to anyone else. Just walked out into the Paris night. That should have been the end of it. An ugly incident at a dinner party. Something to be quietly ashamed of and never spoken of again. But Belmondo didn't stop. Over the next few months, Brigitte started hearing reports. Belmondo was telling the story. At parties, on film sets, in interviews, carefully edited. But the story was there. Brigitte Bardot is so professional. She rehearses her emotions in the mirror, always delivered as admiration, as a compliment to her professionalism, but with just enough edge that people understood. She's fake. She's calculated. There's nothing real underneath. He'd turned her vulnerability into his signature anecdote. In October 1963, Belmondo gave an interview to Cahiers du Cinéma. The journalist asked about working with different actresses, and there it was. Brigitte Bardot is fascinating because she's so aware of her image. Even her spontaneous moments are choreographed. I once heard she practices different emotional expressions in the mirror. It's not criticism, it's impressive. She's turned emotion into technique. The article was titled, Belmondo on the Art of Performance. Brigitte read it and felt sick. He'd taken the cruelest thing Vadim had ever said about her and was now sharing it publicly, disguised as professional admiration. But everyone who read it would understand. Brigitte Bardot is fake. She called him, Jean-Paul. You need to stop. Stop what? Telling that story about me practicing emotions. You're using it in interviews now, making it public. It's a compliment. I'm saying you're professional. You're saying I'm fake. That's what people hear. That Brigitte Bardot is so calculated that even her tears are performance. That's not what I'm saying. Then stop saying it. Stop using my vulnerability as your amusing anecdote. Brigitte, you're being paranoid. Nobody thinks I'm getting calls. People asking if it's true that I rehearse emotions in mirrors. Journalists digging into it. You've turned something private and painful into public speculation. Belmondo was quiet for a moment. Then I honestly didn't think you'd care this much. It's just a story. It's not just a story. It's my reputation, my humanity. You're telling people that I'm not real, that everything about me is manufactured.
I never said that.
You implied it, repeatedly, in front of colleagues, in print, and now it's following me everywhere. What do you want me to do? Stop. Retract it. Tell people you were exaggerating. Something, anything that makes it stop. I can't retract something that's in print, and I wasn't lying. Vadim told me. I don't care what Vadim told you. It was private, between an ex-husband and his drinking buddy. It wasn't meant to be shared with the world. Belmondo didn't stop. He kept telling the story, softer sometimes, more carefully phrased, but always the same implication. Brigitte Bardot rehearses authenticity. She's performance all the way down. It became part of his charm, his insight into the industry, his funny, slightly cruel observations about the people he worked with. And Brigitte became his most famous subject. The damage was subtle but pervasive. Directors started watching her differently, looking for the calculation, the rehearsal, the manufactured emotion. Can you give me something more real, they'd ask, less performed? And Brigitte would think, Belmondo did this. He made everyone question whether I'm capable of real emotion. Reviews started mentioning it. Bardot delivers a calculated performance. Every emotion feels rehearsed. She's technically perfect, but lacks genuine feeling. Were they noticing something real? Or had Belmondo planted the seed that made them see performance, where there was vulnerability? She'd never know, because once someone tells the world you're fake, every authentic moment becomes suspect. In 1965, Brigitte and Belmondo were both at Cannes. He approached her at an after-party. Brigitte, can we talk? I feel like there's been tension. Tension. You humiliated me, then turned that humiliation into your signature anecdote, then shared it publicly for 2 years. That's not tension. That's betrayal. I was trying to compliment your professionalism. No, you were trying to diminish me, to prove that the natural, spontaneous Brigitte Bardot everyone loves is just another performance, that I'm fake, calculated, not real. That's not what I meant. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did. And what you did was unforgivable. Belmondo tried one more time. Can I make it up to you? Tell another story that shows you differently. No, because that would just be another story. Another anecdote, where I'm your subject, where you control the narrative about who I am. Then what do you want? I want you to stop, completely. Never mention me in interviews again. Never tell stories about me. Never use my name for laughs, or insight, or anything. And if I can't promise that, then stay away from me, because I can't trust you, and I won't pretend to be friendly with someone who weaponizes vulnerability. He didn't stop. Not entirely. The story came up less frequently, but it never fully disappeared. It had entered the mythology of Brigitte Bardot, part of her legend. The actress so professional. She rehearses emotions in mirrors, always delivered with admiration, always containing poison. Years later, in 1982, a journalist asked Belmondo about his most memorable co-stars. He mentioned Brigitte, incredibly professional, so dedicated, she'd practice emotional expressions to get them perfect. I admired that about her. The journalist published it. Brigitte, reading the article, felt the old anger return. 20 years later, still telling the story, still using her vulnerability as his anecdote, still unforgivable. In 1998, Belmondo gave a career retrospective interview. The journalist asked, "Any regrets?" "A few. I think I was sometimes cruel without meaning to be. There was a story I told about Brigitte Bardot, about her professionalism, that hurt her. I didn't understand that at the time. I thought it was a compliment. Do you understand now?" "I think so. I exposed something vulnerable, made it public, used it for laughs. That was wrong. Did you ever apologize?" "No. By the time I understood, too much time had passed. And I don't think she'd accept an apology anyway." "Why not?" "Because I kept telling the story. Even after she asked me to stop. That's not something you apologize for. That's something you carry." Brigitte never publicly responded to Belmondo's quasi-apology, but in a 2004 interview, she was asked about him. Jean-Paul Belmondo said he regrets hurting you with a story he told. Do you forgive him? No. Even though he admitted he was wrong, he admitted it 40 years too late. After spending decades using my vulnerability as entertainment, after building part of his charm on diminishing me, what would it have taken for you to forgive him? Stopping when I asked. That's all. I told him it was hurting me. I asked him to stop. He kept going. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And choices have consequences. Belmondo died in The obituaries celebrated him. Charming, talented, beloved, the golden boy of French cinema. Brigitte didn't comment publicly, but privately, she told a friend. He was all those things, and he was also cruel. Both can be true. Do you wish you'd reconciled? No, because reconciliation would have required him to fully understand what he did. And I don't think he ever did. Even in his quasi-apology, He framed it as a misunderstanding. I thought it was a compliment, but it wasn't. It was weaponized vulnerability, and calling it anything else is dishonest. Jean-Paul Belmondo made Brigitte Bardot cry. Then he did something unforgivable. He turned her tears into his punchline, took something vulnerable, something painful, something shared in betrayal by her ex-husband, and made it entertainment. Then he kept doing it. For years, even after she begged him to stop. That's what made it unforgivable. Not the initial cruelty, though that was bad enough, but the sustained cruelty. The refusal to stop, even when confronted with the damage. He knew it hurt her. She told him explicitly, and he decided his anecdote was more important than her pain. That's the calculation Brigitte never forgot. That when given a choice between respecting her humanity and maintaining his charm, Belmondo chose charm. Every time, for decades. And that's why she never spoke to him again. Why she never forgave him. Why his death didn't change her assessment of what he'd done. Some betrayals are too calculated to excuse. Some cruelties too sustained to forgive. Belmondo's was both. And Brigitte carried the consequences for the rest of her life, while he carried the memory of being charmingly cruel, which in the end was its own kind of tragedy. Just not one Brigitte felt obligated to mourn.